Many scholars agree that the most profitable investment with the highest return on investment, indeed, is education. Take a child off the street and immerse them in learning for a considerable period of time, and 9 out of 10 times you have magically transformed a life and made an adult who contributes far more significantly to society in many ways than one. Most successful nations are high up there because they invested in education. They invested in human capital and benefited tremendously from that investment. These nations could be in the global West, in the Middle East, or the global East. Education enables people to fit in more comfortably in society, to imbibe greater values than the pursuit of what Frederick Herzberg termed the hygiene factor. Boost average productivity by a factor of maybe 1,000 or more, and open their eyes and the minds of citizens in the country to the power of innovation. Nigeria today has several problems and issues in the educational sector. Apart from our famous issue of 10 to 15 million children out of school and on the streets in this country, depending on who you believe, we suffer from the low quality teaching in the places where schools exist. We also suffer from ineffective policies such as the 6334. We sought to harness youths with technical abilities at some point. Many states have struggled to ensure improved standards, but the issues are beyond daunting. What about our universities? The lecturers are still on strike as we speak, while the youth pine away in their parents' houses, for those who have the luxury. Our local schools have been altogether abandoned by the middle class as well as the elites, creating a dangerous catch-22 scenario. Which one goes first? Do we fix local schools so that they may be reconsidered by those who have abandoned them? Or do we force those who choose elite and foreign schools for their children to come back so that our local schools may get better? Joining us today is Malam Bolaji Abdullahi, former Commissioner of Education in Kwara State, where he performed an interesting experiment, which he will tell us about today. He was also Minister of Youth Development and later Minister of Youth Development and Sports under the regime of President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan. Malam Abdullahi is an author and a former journalist. He had risen actually to the position of editor in the practice of journalism before going into active politics. I believe also he's still in contention for maybe one of the Senate seats in Kwara State. He will explain himself, actually. So, yeah, I very welcome Bolaji Abdullahi.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
This is the Nationalist. That's the program, the title for this program. So, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for honoring us. You performed a certain experiment where you were Commissioner for Education in Kwara State, which I think a couple of other governors tried to replicate also in their own time. What did you learn from that, sir?
Well, I mean, thank you very much. Let me first of all say that the test that you refer to, we call it development needs assessment, was informed by the need to know the kind of training requirement to give to our teachers. You know, it's like diagnostic tests, you know, so we'll be able to target the intervention that we're planning through our partners and all that. So and before then, we've set up what we call learning achievement targets. You know, what we expected each child to be able to do at every stage of their learning experience, primary 1, 2, 3, 4, especially in numeracy and literacy. So we also understood that the most important resource we needed to achieve those targets was the quality of teachers, the teachers in the classroom. So if we're going to meet our targets, we needed to know the level of proficiency of our teachers so we can train them to meet those targets. And that's when we asked all our teachers to sit for the test. Unfortunately for us, the result we received was shocking. And the most important lesson we learned from that is that the problem of quality of education in our state, like it is across the country, had gone on for so long that many of these teachers were also victims of the same collapsed system. You know, so in other words, we did not frame them as failures or as you know, but as victims of the same system, of the same issue. So we realized that that the problem of collapse of quality had gone on for so long and dated way back before our own time. So, and we were therefore able to understand exactly the kind of limit our expectation, first of all, and know exactly what we needed to do. And alhamdulillah, I can say that before our time in Kwara, many of these teachers that failed the exam had become so good at what they were doing because of the training we gave. We did not sack a single teacher. We did not sack a single teacher as a result of this. And these same teachers that failed the exams were doing so well before we left that we restored confidence in our public schools, and parents were removing their children from private schools and bringing them back to public schools. You know,
what were the deficiencies you saw then? Was it like very basic numeracy, literacy issues, or technical skills?
Not just technical skills were there because you know, don't forget that many of these teachers were products of the colleges of education. Yes. That was the minimum requirement you needed to teach. But if you look at the curriculum of the colleges of education, they were not tailored after the primary school curriculum. So you could have someone who has NCE political science education. You're not going to teach political science in primary school. NCE
exactly.
Business education. You're not going to teach business in primary school. Yes. So the curriculum that produced them was incongruent with the demands of their jobs. That is number one. Number two, like I said, you know, I can't remember any school before now, in our own time, where reading was taught as a distinct subject, where literacy was taught as a distinct subject. You know, so critical thinking was taught as a distinct subject. So these teachers were prepared for a different era, you know, than the one that they were now required to teach in. So a simple question like, it will take 30 minutes to get to the market. If I leave at 10:30, what time will I arrive? You know, I mean, if you had asked that person, it will take 30 minutes. If you say 30 plus 30, something like that. He will know it, he or she will know it. But when you frame it that way, then it unsettles them. I give Tope 10 oranges, he has 5 friends. You know, how many orange will each person get? Exactly. You know, those kind of questions. You know, it's very simple, basic questions. But because of the manner it was framed, it threw many of them. But more fundamentally, is that there were so many people who were teachers at that time, they were not properly admitted into the teaching. They were just got in because of political patronage. You know, someone is a political leader in one corner, you say, give me 5 names. I mean, someone had the effrontery to come to my office and said, oh, my son needed a job, even if it is teaching.
Even if it is teaching.
I felt so insulted, you know. Wow. How could you, that's the most important job in the world. Wow. And you came to me and said, even if it is teaching. Wow. So there is a political dimension.
That attitude is pervasive everywhere in this country today. And you know, sometimes I have discussion with my friends who are economists and so on. And I wonder when you say, oh, let's say, for example, everybody should be an entrepreneur. I say, so who's going to do the teaching? You know, some of these jobs are more important and all of that and so on. You know, so very important. Now, we forget that we were groomed by people. But 2 things I want to ask. Your policy, was it continued afterwards?
Well, I mean, regrettably, no. It wasn't continued because the kind of policy environment that was required and the kind of political context that was required that allowed me to do those things that I did was no longer available. Because I mean, in our own case, there was a single incident that inspired the entire reform we did. You know, I was just newly appointed as commissioner, and I was going around the schools, and I saw this girl writing the common entrance examination, which was a primary 6 exit point examination. And this girl, I found, even when her name was written for her on our answer sheet, you know, she could not read it. Wow. You know, so when I reported this to my governor, Dr. Saraki, at the time, you know, he felt outraged. At first, he didn't believe it, you know, but eventually when he came around to accepting that that was what actually happened, he said, look, go ahead and do whatever was required, you know, to fix this problem. You know, education reform is political.
Right.
and it's
It is
politically
very,
contentious because
very.
there will be losers,
Yes.
you know. So if I didn't have the kind of political
Yeah,
backing that I
backing,
had,
yeah.
I would probably not have been able to go
I wanted to
go
ask
as
you
far as I
something
did.
on the side, though. I knew for many years you were a journalist. One
Yeah,
of the best columnists we had in this country. I
yeah,
think you still write anyway.
yeah,
Maybe not as frequently as before.
yeah.
How were you able to make that cut over from being a journalist to being a commissioner for education? Because I'm not sure you read education. I can't tell though. That's
Yeah.
one. And also, how did you do it at the federal level? When you started handling sports,
Yeah.
I know you probably are a sportsman, but I'm not sure they even use that criteria to send people there. So how are you, that transition? I'm very much interested.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me say that there are two things to it. One, I trained as a journalist.
Yeah.
I studied mass communication in Lagos. I trained as a journalist. And you know that the most important skill for a journalist is to know how to ask questions
Wow.
and get the right answer.
Wow.
That's one. Two, I have a graduate degree in governance and development.
Okay.
From University of Sussex IDS.
Yeah.
So
Chevening scholar.
I was a Chevening scholar as well. Thank you. So these two experiences prepared me for the work that I eventually came to do in the public space. Policy making or policy the principles of policy making or implementation is the same.
Yeah.
The principles are the same. So no matter whether it's in the health sector, in the education sector, in the sports industry, or any other sector, as a matter of fact, so because of this background, my education background, my professional training background, even though, like you said, I never studied education. In fact, when I was appointed by Dr. Saraki, many people who were like more educated in the education sector, who were professors and all that, were amused that a journalist was being appointed as commissioner for education. So you have to give it to Dr. Saraki that he gave me that. Yeah, he could see what I was able to do. So the first thing I did was to ask questions, and the more questions I asked, the more answers I was able to elicit. And I already, because of my own background as a student of policy, I was able to translate the answers into specific intervention and reform actions, And when I became Minister of Sports, my only interest in sports is that I watch Chelsea FC and all that, But again, it's the same thing. We went to the Olympics in 2012. We came back with nothing.
Wow.
So when we returned to the country, of course, as a student of policy, I had to begin to ask myself, where did it go wrong? And it was clear to me that Olympics is not something you prepare for in 2 years or in 4 years or even in 5 years. It's a lifetime commitment for individuals who want to be the best in the world. After Olympics, there was no next level.
I mean, Nigeria has a way of focusing only on football.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And you have so many other sports.
And for you to be, for you to have podium success at the Olympics, global competition like the Olympics, you would have, performance experts will tell you that you would have put in 10,000 hours of training.
Absolutely.
10,000 hours of training. Because like I said earlier, after the Olympics, there is no next level, right?
Yes.
So for you to be the very, very best, you have to almost like defy human capacity, So you don't do that in 2 years or 3 years. It's something, So when we returned from the Olympics and we were catching hell and everybody was like, oh, money down the drain and all that, say, hang on, what do we really need to do? Do we have the right to actually expect anything? So the work that we went on to do was the result of the questions that we were asking, and that made us realize what we needed to do. Of course, we also knew that we were running a government that had a limited time.
Absolutely.
And we had to show results. Yeah, we had to show results as quickly as possible. So I'm glad that we're able to win the AFCON, the African Cup of Nations, after 19 years. And in no time we became the African champions in athletics for senior, junior, and the intermediate level.
Well, is there anything we could do, sir, regarding policy consistency, continuity? Because I think we're kind of stuck, in a kind of catch-22 scenario whereby governments get 4 years, maybe they struggle for another 4 years,
Yeah.
8 years. Sometimes they have to change the cabinet.
Yeah.
Policies are dumped.
Yeah.
Politics comes in.
Yeah.
And while all this is going on, the nation, in fact, in reverse.
Yeah.
Is there anything, have you thought about it? What could be done?
My argument in respect of the sports sector, to start with, is that I would have argued that the National Sports Commission that was established as an agency of the sports ministry would have allowed the kind of long-term planning that is required to get results at the sport level. Because if you appoint a director general for the National Sports Commission, had a 4-year tenure, will have a 4-year tenure and renewable for 4 years, and I think it can still be renewable.
Yes.
It's still renewable. So if you have a gentleman or a lady that is at the head of the National Sports Commission for 8-year period, then they could actually lay a very solid foundation for what needs to be done.
Yeah.
But hey, I would have said that before now, but I can't confidently say that is the solution now because we have a minister. I'm sorry, I'm not criticizing him. He's my very good friend. We have a minister who have been there for almost 8 years now, and I try to imagine what could have been done, with that period. We tried to set up the high performance system because we found that every nation on earth that is doing well at the global competition level has brought science into sports.
Absolutely. I want you to hold your thoughts. We're gonna go on a short break, and when we come back, we're still with Madam Bolaji Abdullahi, former Minister of Sports, and also Commissioner for Education. That education bit is where we're going to be drilling him on, and all of that. So kindly hold to the station for now. Thank you. Welcome back, viewers, to your show, The Nationalist, and we're still with Malam Bolaji Abdullahi, former Minister for Sports and also former Commissioner for Education. So you were saying something about the sports industry before we went on a break, but I'll give you maybe a few minutes to speak about that, and then we go back to the subject of education.
I actually saying that when we realized that we needed to bring science into sports, we tried to establish the high performance system. Again, that was something that would have put us on a very good standing.
Right.
The president at the time, President Jonathan, was fully connected to the idea of developing sports generally. So there were different initiatives that we started, that if institutionalized, because what we were doing after London 2012, we knew that we're not going to make much progress in Brazil, Rio, the following year, but we were very certain that if we started in 2012 to begin to prepare, by Tokyo, by Tokyo 2020, Nigeria will do well. So it was an 8-year program that we started. Unfortunately, I had to leave government, or I was asked to leave in 2014, and the whole thing went to the dock. So if Nigeria wants to do this, we need a more holistic approach and a more sustainable approach. Not that, before I got the ministers of sports were being changed like core members almost every year, So anyway, but that's that about the sports.
So fantastic. I think we need to have another discussion on sports specifically. And I've always been of the opinion, that we over-concentrate on football, soccer, in the Olympics, which I term a world war by other means. You call it by sports. And I see the seriousness that people put into it.
And let me point something out quickly. You will see that it's not coincidence that if you look at the Olympic medal table, they tend to reflect the GDP of countries of the world. There is a correlation. So let's leave
Fantastic. I did that analysis as well. So, but I mean, I'm gonna have to book your time at some other time. But back to the issue of education. If you look at the primary, secondary, and tertiary, they seem to have different, if you like, maybe peculiar problems. What's the assessment? Right now, we have ASU is on strike. Everybody has abandoned the public. In fact, when you mentioned the teachers and colleges of education. When we had the unfortunate incident in Sokoto, I had cause to tell people. At some point, I went to college of education in Zuba here.
Yeah.
At some point, I had an elderly friend there who, she's late now, they're former dean of students. And I found out that the poorest of the poor in Nigeria are the ones that go to college education.
Yeah, yeah.
And then so we have college education, you have polytechnic, you have universities, you have, and so on. What's your assessment of this sector? And how can we solve the problem?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think one of the first things I would say is that the entire structure is faulty. The bulk of the funding, I don't have the numbers, please. The bulk of the funding in the education sector, like this year for tertiary education, the entire budget was 14 trillion. 14 trillion. That is after defense, education comes next, right? But if we are spending more money on the education sector than we've ever spent at any time in our history, how come we are ending up with this kind of situation? So you could see clearly that, funding is still a problem, but it's more of a problem of allocative efficiency. How are we spending the money? What are we spending the money on? At the moment, the bulk of the money in the education sector is going to the federal universities and the federal polytechnics, right?
Yes.
Whereas we should be spending more money in basic education.
Basic education.
Right? All that money in TED fund should be going to basic education, if you ask me, right? So but unfortunately, we are not doing that at the moment. I think if we want to address the problem of quality in education, is to take all that money and put in basic education, redesign the objective for secondary education. If a child goes to a secondary school in Nigeria, what do you expect that child to be able to do? Right? And put resources accordingly based on the answer to this question and how it connects to the national development agenda, right? For tertiary education, there is nowhere in the world where the tertiary education is given, where university education is a given and is an automatic transition. That once you finish secondary school, then you have to. But again, when they don't go to universities, when children don't go to university, then what do they do?
What do they do?
You know, there is a huge gap.
You know, and society gives them a feedback.
Absolutely.
Down there.
There is a huge gap in post-secondary, at post-secondary level in Nigeria. So everybody that is leaving secondary school is either go to university or go to a polytechnic, and worst case scenario, go to the college of education. But there's a critical space in between, you know, that can be filled. If that space is filled, and that is the space for vocational and technical education, post-secondary, right? If we are able to fill that space, you know, the way we should, then you find that there will be no such pressure in higher education, university education, and all that. You know, so if you ask me at the moment, we first of all look at the issue of allocative efficiency. You know, so the pyramid at the moment is upside down, right? The base is weak and the top is wide. You know, so we first of all need to deal with that. The second one is, how do we attract the right kind of people into teaching? The most brilliant among us. How do we attract them into teaching, and how do we keep them in the schools? And the way to do that is to address the problem that you just explained, the story you just narrated to me. How do we fix the colleges of education, put all that money that we are allocating, discretionary funding that's available everywhere, how do we put it in the colleges of education and make colleges of education, fixing colleges of education at the front of primary education reform? Because that's where the teachers will come. It's a funnel, you know. So you don't treat the colleges of education as part of the tertiary establishment. You treat them especially as part of your effort to improve quality of education. Now, if you go to a room and ask children who among you want to be teachers, you'll probably find none. Right now, what do we do to give incentives to young people to want to be teachers?
You know, you know, Minister Abdullah, you know, it's been one of my serious agonies, you know. Governments support governments, they come, you hear all the youths go into entrepreneurship, there's no work. And what do they mean by entrepreneurship? The entrepreneurship we promise in Nigeria is you buy from abroad, you sell here, a middleman who's creating what? Nothing.
Nothing,
And we have 15 million children on this.
Absolutely.
What
absolutely,
I see in 15 million children is opportunities for teachers.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you like, for construction of new schools, for a total transformation.
Absolutely.
And that is, like we started this program, we said investment in education is where you will find the highest ROI because you're transforming minds.
Look, if you make teaching competitive, that you recruit the most brilliant among us,
exactly, like
give them scholarship, 100% scholarship to go to the colleges of education. Fix those colleges of education, make them look like elite colleges,
right,
and recruit the best from secondary school, put them there, give them 100% scholarship,
right,
and guaranteed employment that will pay them what they will ordinarily earn, decouple their payment from the national teaching scale, create a special teaching scale,
absolutely,
or teacher scale, sorry, so they can earn what they can earn in the bank or elsewhere, they can earn it as teachers.
Absolutely.
Then you are going to begin to address this problem seriously. Nigeria can afford it, right? And that's what we need to do, you know, if we must attract the most brilliant among us. At the moment, like I said initially, it's only those who can find no alternative in life that say they want to be teachers. And you want result? No, it cannot happen.
In fact, you know, I mean, we have just 30 seconds to go.
Yeah.
There's so much that needs to be done. Like I said, I'm going to have to hustle you back here, maybe in a month's time or something. I'll come and beg you and see what we can do. Last shot, you know. So, if you were Minister of Education, let's say in the next regime, and said, or next administration, we shouldn't use regime for civilian government, you know. So, what are the other magics that you, if I may use that word, magics?
There are no magics. Let's just take the issue of ASU strike, for example.
Right.
This problem is solvable. You know, if I were to deal with that problem today, this is what I would do, right? One, we have to draw the line. Whatever commitment, whatever promises that the federal government has made to ASU, you have to clear it.
Exactly.
So you start on a clean slate.
Exactly. Yeah.
Then the next thing you do is decentralization. This system is not working. A system where someone sits in Abuja and administer all universities in Nigeria is not going to work. Let every university grow at its own pace, set its own priority, decides who to recruit, decides what to pay, right? You develop your capacity for monitoring, and your monitoring is targeted at what you have defined as your priority for national development. If we don't do that, then we'll just continue to move in circles.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming, Madam Abdullahi. And we've been listening to Madam Bolaji Abdullahi, some great ideas there. There's so much to talk about, so much we haven't been able to cover in this session, and hopefully we'll get him back. I wish that the national government, and whoever is going to come after this present administration, understand just a focus on the basic education, a renewed focus and renewed calibration, okay, is what we need. So anyway, thank you very much for staying tuned to the Nationalist, and see you next week.